and I don't know if a lot of you saw this, Kyle Long even took notice of the way that Justin Fields was taking batting practice. As a matter of fact, Kyle took to Twitter and said, and I quote, "I'm going to drop everything I'm doing this instant to say that this kid is more than just an extremely high ceiling quarterback." Long tweeted out, "He's a freak of nature. I'm all in on him now." Now, Kyle, now is when you're all in? No, I'm just kidding. But here's the thing. I really do believe that a lot of the criticisms and the joking and everybody going after Justin Fields is very similar to the way, and this is personal to me, is the way that people went after Shohei Ohtani when he first came up with the Angels. Like a lot of people don't want to remember this, but he struggled in spring training his first year, and everybody wrote him off before the season even started. That he was amazing, that he had Tommy John, and then people didn't think he was going to come back from Tommy John. I really do believe, and this has nothing to do with Justin Fields taking batting practice, I really do believe that by October of this coming season, there are going to be a lot of people out there tweeting a lot of old takes. And the bad news for you is that guys like Ill Will and me, we've been screenshotting them. You're not going to be able to run from them. So just be prepared for that. And be prepared for this excellent show that we have that, you know what, Sammy? Why don't you go ahead and roll that animation and start the show?
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
Trying to cut it back. Justin Fields making magic happen. There goes Fields. Touchdown!
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
Welcome to the Sick Podcast. We have got a great show for you today. If you're a fan of the world of wrestling, you're going to love this show because my guest, I'm going to be so excited to bring him out here in a couple of moments. But just want to let you know that mandatory mini camps are getting started for the Chicago Bears. So keep an eye out. There's some things that we'll be watching over the next couple of days. You know, how does this offensive line shake up? I know there was some shifting around last week. People are freaking out. Tevin Jenkins was with the second team, but you know what? Until these guys get into pads, then there really isn't anything that we need to be panicking about. There's still a long ways to go. There's still a full training camp. So again, there'll be some things that we keep an eye on, but everybody, let's not get too worked up. But I do want you to get worked up for our first guest here. Now, he's an Eagles fan. He's an alumnus of Penn State. He got his break in broadcasting doing the PA during his high school career, which, by the way, he played high school backgammon. I don't know how much you know of me. I love backgammon. I can never find anybody to play backgammon of me. I cannot believe that somebody was able to do this in high school. In addition to that, he went on to be a world-renowned broadcaster. He was once stalked by Alicia Fox, which I think would have been one of the best storylines to be a part of. He's a carrot kid, which he can explain later. He doesn't dress well, apparently. I didn't know this because I only see him on TV dressed to the nines, but apparently his mom says he's a casual dresser. I did not know this. He's the co-host of the Pay Dirt, a Penn State podcast. Again, he's an Eagles fan, and you know him from his days in the WWE. But now he is with Impact Wrestling, who on Saturday, I believe it is Saturday, Slammiversary, 20 years of TNA and Impact Wrestling. It's amazing how the years fly by. But please welcome to the show, my friend, Tom Hannafan.
I got to look into this backgammon thing. You did a real deep dive. Like either you combed through my Wikipedia or did you call my mom?
I did. The best way to do this whenever you're, whatever I like to do is like, go look for the interviews. I will go to Wikipedia because they have the bookmarks.
Oh yeah.
For where this information comes from. So I go through and it's an article from a Penn State publication. Because of course they got a Jim Ross quote about like, hey, he called you, Jim Ross called you low maintenance, which I'm like, I don't know. I go, wait a minute, Jim, I don't know if that's, I don't know what you're going for here, but he's like hardworking kid that we attribute to his time at Penn State, which is like, okay, that makes sense. And then your mother referred to you as a carrot kid. And I'm like, oh, is he like carrot cake or is he like, I don't know. Maybe, is really worried about his eyesight. But no, it means like as long as you have the carrot dangled in front of you, is I think the metaphor she was going for.
Yeah, I'm very persistent, ambitious. If I've got a goal in front of me, that definitely helps. So mom was right about that. I think that was my good buddy Steve Samsel from back in the day at Penn State who wrote that article. From that, now it's all coming back to me. And thank you, JR, for calling me low maintenance. Hopefully there that sticks with him to this day. I don't know.
I think actually I do think that's good. I think that's because you're not a diva. Now our friend,
as far as I know,
as far as you know. Now we have a number of mutual friends, but one of ours, John Quasto, he's who's been on the show. That's the most high. I would call him high maintenance.
Oh my God,
he is the most
extraordinarily. I mean,
we tease him.
Brutal. He's like, I'm a stand-up, but I'm also doing commentary. I'm like, just like pick one. Like be good at one thing and then not be good at 6 other things as well. It's one of the most annoying qualities I can imagine.
It is disgusting how good he is at everything. And it is one of the, I never have played sports with him that I think, trying to remember, have we played pickup or something like that? I know he had an injury, but I think he's one of those people. And again, he was on our show before the Super Bowl talking up his Chiefs. And it's like, God, he is just like, and he's good looking. And you're like, I remember when we were in the comedy scene in Orange County, just being like, I immediately didn't like him.
But
like,
there's so few of you guys, like what's the problem? Are you afraid of competition? What's the problem?
Yes, 100%. Like he's too good looking. He's taller. He's way better looking. Like he's funnier. Like I don't like any of this. He checks every box. I check none of them. I'm the guy. I'm the one that you call up at the last minute when Johnny cancels. When Johnny cancels at Brea, I got to call 20 minutes before the show. Can you get up here? Like, yeah.
You want $50 on a hot dog? We can help you out.
$50. I'm not working all week. It's one night. How are you though? How is everything going for you? I really enjoy the product. I know I want to talk football. But real quick, I love the product at Impact. I think it's a great. I love it. And my friend Eric Young is battling for the championship.
Love EY.
But I think it's been really fun. How have you been enjoying? I love your look. Like, look, I noticed this when you signed with Impact, you suddenly became way cooler. Like, no disrespect.
Oh, thank you. No,
but like, look at you. You're like your profile pic on Twitter. You're like, whoa, like who is this? Like, you're not used to it because you're used to like suit and tie.
Yeah.
Like okay. And then you see Tom Hannafan, and you're like, oh, Tom Hannafin's a badass. Like,
right.
Like
so let me unpack a lot of this. So first of all, not to correct you, but to do the shameless shill up front. Slammiversary is Sunday.
Oh my God!
Live on pay-per-view and Fight TV. It's okay. I'm just trying to educate the masses. All good.
I cannot tell.
It's literally, but no, Adam, the great thing about it is, yes, Saturday pay-per-views are really big in wrestling, but the reason it's happening this Sunday, June 19th in Nashville, Tennessee, is because it is literally to the day, the 20-year anniversary of Impact Wrestling, the very first broadcast that ever went out. So it's just a beautiful thing that we actually like, oh my God, it's on a weekend. And yeah, you bump it to a Sunday, but it should be a lot of fun. To your point about, okay, so the first picture, I guess, that went out of me at Impact Wrestling. Yeah. So I knew in my head, I was like, I'm going all black Johnny Cash. Like there was never a doubt in my head. And I called Josh Matthews like a week ahead of time. And I was like, do I have to wear a tie? And he was like, no. I was like, great. Fantastic. It was always one of these things that like, I obviously have a beard and my hair grows in quickly. Yeah. So I was like, it always like bothered me. And I'd be calling stuff for WWE and I just would sweat. And I'm like, it was so uncomfortable. And I was like, you know what? Let's mix it up a little bit. Let's get the chest hair out there. Let's show everybody what's happening. And all of a sudden, I think there's this thing with wrestling fans that when you go from your ring name, which is Tom Phillips, is the intellectual property of WWE. People thought for years Phillips was legitimately my last name because it's so simple. And that's kind of the idea. But all of a sudden, once you get your real name out there, people inherently are like, oh, this is the real person. This is the real performer, etc. So I don't know what Magic Fairy Dust went out there and gave you that impression, but hey, that's pretty much what I was going for, to be like, hey, I'm done with that, and this is me.
Yeah, it's funny because, a lot of that stuff, we were just talking about John Quasto. His real name is Johnny LaQuasto.
Yes.
If you see him, like he goes by, like we used to call him J-Lo forever, and then he gets on to WWE. I'm like, they have to. I teased him. I'm like, at least they let you keep your last name. A lot of these guys,
Well,
They don't get it.
I went through that with him because he had to submit ring names and such, and I was, I guess, his quasi boss at the time. So he asked, he was like, "Can I just be Quasto?" Because even his social media handles were like Jay Quasto, and I was like, "Yeah, if we can clear it with legal," and they did. And I was like, "This is easy as hell for you, man. Like you can just kind of follow along what everybody calls you." And then he was like, "Do I have to change my social media handles?" I was like, "No, dude, you're already there." So. It worked out really nicely for him. So I wish we could have kept him on longer than we did, but things happen.
Yeah, I'm still mad at you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking. I know it's not your. No. I know. Listen, it's that business, and I want to talk more about that. But I also want to talk some football because I'm in a weird balance here because I'm sure there's a lot of people tuning in because they want to hear you and they want to hear these wrestling stories. But then there's also people like I love football. I don't like wrestling. But we can make a simple transition by talking about your time. But Penn State. Mm-hmm. And with Penn State comes a mutual admiration for us for Allen Robinson, who is joining the Los Angeles Rams this season. He's not playing for either one of our teams. I think we're still rooting for him. How do you feel that Allen Robinson is going to do this season?
I think he's going to do great. It's just a question of like, do the Rams have the Super Bowl hangover? Matthew Stafford, was all the motivation leading up to finally winning a Super Bowl? Like, do you kind of take your foot off the gas, or is he as motivated and hungry as ever? I love seeing Allen Robinson with Cooper Kupp. Like that just feels like a nightmare for opposing defenses. And they only seem to be, in my opinion, they found their stride as an offense in the second half of the season. So it makes you concerned for everybody else. It's like, oh, they just kind of started figuring this out. Defensively, they really hit their rhythm late in the season because of some midseason additions. So I think they're going to be nasty again. And Allen Robinson's a guy I've had on my podcast, Pater, the Penn State football show with Matt McGloin. Yeah, we got him the day after the Monday Night Football loss.
Oh, my God.
Matt McGloin played with him briefly, reached out to him. God bless Allen Robinson for the day after a game, hopping on our small podcast. So we appreciated it.
Well, it was last season with the Bears. I'm sure he wasn't too concerned with the way things were going. So he was like, whatever. He's like, I'm out of here. And believe me, I'm like, I don't care. Like people, I know there's Bears fans who are still upset with him. I'm like, they did him dirty. Like, I'm not going to fault him for that. He is, to me, still the same person he was who chose to play here. He came from Jacksonville and he chose to play with the Chicago Bears. So that to me will always carry a lot of weight. So I will always forever be a fan. I got to try to get him on. I'm always bashful about asking, like, especially when people have things going on, it's like, we'll see.
Yeah. That's how I felt. I was like, he's in the middle of an NFL season and McGloin, again, like a teammate. So it's like, okay, great. Like he did great with that stuff. And when it comes to our podcast, McGloin does all the reaching out to the athletes. Because God knows I tried up front and they're like, who is this guy? So they're going to respond better to McGloin, but you've got a platform. You've got NFL Network behind you. It shouldn't be too hard.
Well, Robinson he knows me because he follows me on social media and he responds to me. So we had a discussion about Del Taco the other day. So I'm like, okay, we're still cool. So I don't have to worry about that. He knows, like he would know that if he watched these guys, I know follow the product closer than a lot of people let on. I know that when Kyle Long came into the studio one time, he's like, oh, I know who you are. And I'm like, how are you? But he was telling me, he's like, and we noticed that you're never, like me personally, like you never talk ass. You're always positive. I'm always positive about that and about the Angels and stuff like that. So I'm like, yeah, because like I always feel like these guys are probably reading it. They don't need to hear this from me.
It's like there's an honesty that you need to have, like how you feel about it. But then we all naturally, as people in the media that have not been professional athletes, you do kind of have to check that on a regular basis. And it's something I've been learning now, post WWE and doing my own show. It's just like, like you can have your assumptions, but at the end of the day, you kind of need to ask the people that actually lived it. And you can just trying to make educated guesses and asking questions at the end of the day.
Yeah. And then it's funny too, because working with a lot of guys like that, and I'm sure you get that working with Matt, is that it's nice to combine the two. Like I always find the best things, like I have these conversations. What are the best guys to work with? Or some of the best people to work with at NFL Network. Just great ones. D'Angelo, Michael Robinson, David Carr, Steve Smith Sr., and Willie McGinnis. Willie McGinnis I've been working with a lot lately. He's really good about, like, he does not like numbers people. But he does value my input on stuff, and he uses it, and we kind of combine. And I think that when you can combine those two things, it always helps out. Because at the end of the day, it's still human beings playing a sport, which is unpredictable. Like
Right,
it's not.
there's so many emotions and things that go into it, and like how often do people actually consider what the athlete is dealing with off the field in their personal life? Like you have no idea what's going on with them. And then something I've talked to with a lot of wrestlers who used to be professional athletes, regardless of the league or sport, is that the vast majority of athletes, it's a job. So it's like, I'm going to work. They're making a ton of money. And at the same time, I think all of us as fans would be like, you should be bleeding for the Chicago Bears and such.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I'm just trying to get out of here safely without my leg snapped in half so I can feed my family,
It's crazy. Like there's different, like there are people who are like that. Like there are former players that you see who are like I'm bleeding for my team. I don't care if I'm able to walk after this. And then there's other guys who like exactly how you described, and I won't call anybody out. I'm like, I was shocked the first time. I'm like, you did? He's like, I was worried about getting that next paycheck and doing this. And I'm like, oh my, he's like, yeah. And if it was, cold out, maybe my hamstrings started acting. I'm like, oh my God, like, I don't want to hear this. I want everybody to be invested as I am. And I think that's what sometimes, and that's why it comes down to predictions. Like, I don't know, like who has a kid who was up all night, Saturday night before the game, like things like that. Like, you don't know, like there's a lot of things that happened. By the way, one thing that I do know that happened, and since you're an Eagles fan, I'm gonna put this on you. Doug Peterson did his friend Matt Nagy dirty when he called when he iced Cody Parkey. I even said, I was like, there's no, I go, you know what? I go, Peterson is friends with Nagy. There's no way he'll ice Parkey. Then Parkey makes the field goal, and you're like, oh wait, he iced him? Like, son of a b. I don't need to know. I don't even need to watch the rest of the game. I know that he's going to miss the next kick, which he did. Number one, did Doug Peterson do him dirty? And number two, where were you? What are your memories of the double doink? And I know the Chicago fans, who are pretty much 99% of this audience, you might want to tune away for a second. We got to talk about this, because I think this is how we heal.
It was so beautiful to watch, because like the Eagles did not play well in that game. Like Alshon Jeffrey kind of like came on at the end and helped out a little bit. And that was kind of towards the decline of his entire career, but not to get hung up on Alshon. But I want to say, so that was a Sunday night game, right? Or was it a Monday night game? I'm trying to remember. I remember.
No. That was, we played, that was the Saturday, I think. I don't remember. I can't remember.
So I remember Monday. I remember being at home to watch the game, and I was with my family, and just like seeing the double doink, like you didn't believe it at first. And then when it bounces off and you see the mascot in the back just collapse to the ground, it was hilarious. And I was like, oh, like for a second, you just kind of brace yourself and you're like, what just happened? Like you see all the different angles and you're like, oh my God. And then the kicker slowly just dissolving. And then the best part was that whether it was the next day or Monday, I can't recall. At the time, obviously, I was working for WWE, so I ran into Seth Rollins in the hallway. He was a big Chicago Bears fan. And is great about tweeting out after the Bears lose, I hate football, or when they win, I love football. I passed him the hallway, and I just said, doink, and he was like, shut up, Phillips.
Oh, my God.
So there is a really healthy amount of trash talking backstage in wrestling, especially when football season's going on, and I'm excited to deal with it in Impact. As you mentioned, EY's a big hockey guy, but like most of the guys there are into football, especially when I was in WWE. Kofi Kingston, ruthless in support of his Patriots. I remember once upon a time, the late Brody Lee, big fan of the Washington football team, so he was always behind those guys, and like it would get nasty. So yeah, that was always fun. I love that. And the double doink was hilarious. So sorry, guys.
That wasn't that funny.
It was pretty funny. Yeah. But yes, Peterson did do him dirty, but it worked. So, whatever.
I know. Whatever works. You're out there going to win a Super Bowl. Wait, you'd already won the Super Bowl.
That was the year after, if I remember.
Why did you guys even care? Like, that's the thing I was the most, like, you guys don't care.
Every Philadelphia sports fan as that 2017 season was going on, was like, there's no way we win the Super Bowl. Like, it's like, okay, like every year it's like, it's so polarizing in the Philadelphia sports community. Like if they lose, the sky is falling. If they win, it's the greatest team ever. It's just, there's no in between. So as that season's progressing, everybody is still saying like, they suck. They're not actually going to do anything. And then they get into the playoffs and they start rolling and they're like, oh my God. And then even when they got into the Super Bowl, it was like, oh, well, it's against the Patriots. Like we're probably going to lose. So I didn't believe that we'd won the game until minutes after the game had ended, because if you remember, there was like a last second pass to Gronk in the back of the end zone. And I thought for sure there would be a holding penalty because the freaking Patriots always get the penalty, something.
Yeah.
So we win the Super Bowl. Everybody agrees that, you know what? We got our Super Bowl. We sold our soul to the devil just to get the Super Bowl. And then like week 4 into the next season, we're all like, well, why aren't we doing that well? Like, I forget what our record was, but we were not like 4-0, and everybody freaked out. So that playoff run that led to the double doink was very much kind of like, we're not supposed to really be here. And then I forget, did we get bounced by the Saints in the next round?
The Saints beat you the next round. And the funny thing too was the fact that the Bears won a somewhat meaningless game that eliminated the Minnesota Vikings, that allowed the Eagles to even get into the playoffs. And I remember our friend, the Blue Meanie, Brian Heffron, who he tweeted out that Paulie from Goodfellas, like, hey, thank you, but now I got to turn my back on you, like type of thing. Like he's giving Henry the money, but he's like, nah, I got to turn my back on you. And I'm like, this is going to end up screwing us. But I'm like, we can't. I always felt like if you and it's Kirk Cousins, so they should have tried to play them, but it's like, if you let a team into the playoffs, I feel like that's worse karma. I thought that the football gods would rally around the Bears for doing the right thing of knocking the Vikings out of the playoffs. And to me, that's like a playoff win. Keeping the Vikings out, that's hilarious because they suck.
God. Yeah.
And then the Eagles weren't playing well. Like the defending champions, like they're mailing it in. They don't care. And then you guys go to New Orleans and you play that game, and then Nick Foles has an opportunity to win. And you're like, oh my God, Nick Foles is going to do this again. Mm-hmm. And it just was laying out perfectly, because they would have ended up playing the LA Rams in the NFC Championship game. Nick Foles revenge game against the Rams. Like, oh my God. Like, I remember thinking like the Eagles are going to win this again. Like, how crazy is that to go up against the Patriots? But unfortunately or fortunately, that's the way it turned out. They fired Doug Peterson a couple of seasons later. How do you feel about that, by the way? Does that to me, I thought like, right? Like I thought that Doug Peterson was going to be able to be there forever.
I think clearly Doug Peterson, we can all see now in retrospect, was a casualty of the Carson Wentz debacle. And there was some attempt to be like, let's make Carson happy. There's obviously issues between the front office and Peterson. There's issues between Wentz and Peterson. So it's like, oh, let's go out. And you would imagine the first attempt was to go get Frank Reich. And he was like, I'm not leaving Indianapolis. He had a good thing going. So they're like, why don't we get your understudy from Indianapolis, who no one had heard of and had maybe one of the worst first press conferences I've ever seen in Nick Sirianni. Like
brutal.
Everybody in Philly was like, this guy's the head coach after coming off of Andy Reid and freaking Doug Peterson. I was like, give me a break. So to see the way this Eagles team last year really started to actually catch on under Sirianni, and for him to get more comfortable, I was like, okay, like this is moving in the right direction, but still, I don't think you can reasonably look at the firing of Doug Peterson and say that it was warranted for anything he was doing at the time. I think he should still be here.
Yeah. And I think that, Doug Peterson was so fed up that when he was in that Washington game and they benched the quarterback, been like, nah, we're going to I think it was benching Hurts. And they're just like, nah, we're going to mail this one in, let Washington go to the playoffs. We're not even going to try, which is hilarious because as much as you hate Washington, you got to hate the Giants too. So you kind of screw the Giants. Like there's a little fun thing going on. Mm-hmm. And, but I think that Peterson probably did the right thing. Like, fine, you guys they wanted to get rid of him. I'll give you a reason to get rid of me. And then you go about your business. I was somewhat hoping the Bears would take a run at him, but I'm fine with the hiring of Matt Eberflus. But as you talk about Nick Sirianni, and again, the first couple of weeks were brutal. It kind of reinforced what we saw in the press conference where he's talking about Rochambeau or rock, paper, scissors or something insane.
We got to compete, and then we're going to teach a simple program or a simple system because simple systems, like it's one of the dumbest rants I've ever heard. And then even middle of the season, he's like, we've planted a flower and it takes a while for that flower to bloom. And I was like, imagine being a multi-millionaire and a veteran of imagine being Fletcher Cox and being like, we're talking about flowers. We're talking about flowers. And to his credit, the flower bloomed. Like, we made a playoff game that we had no business making, and we got smoked by the Buccaneers. But still, like, that wasn't supposed to happen.
The playoffs, though, you made the playoffs, and that's important because he made an adjustment. And he made an adjustment. He started running the football more and realizing, like, our receivers are brutal outside of Devonta Smith, who was battling injuries. So you didn't really get a full season. You didn't really get a full look at him.
Yeah.
And when I look at that Eagles team, you know, I kind of see a lot of similarities to the position the Bears are in right now. You know, former Colts assistant comes in. But I think the Eagles are in pretty good shape. I think that, you know, that was a good foundation for last year. How do you feel? They go out there, they make the move for A.J. Brown. Now they got, you know, another weapon for Jalen Hurts. How do you feel about the Eagles this season?
A.J. Brown feels really good so far. Very curious to see what it looks like, you know, actually in camp across from Devonta Smith, because they're just such different athletes. And then you add in Dallas Goedert at tight end, who is finally being given the role that he's wanted. Zach Ertz gets traded last season. You're the guy. So now the onus is on Goddard to actually deliver on it. I'm very curious to see how Miles Sanders does in terms of durability this season, because when he was in the game, there was often the imbalance of, like, he's in the game, but they're not giving him the ball. And then certain games they would give him the ball and it's like, oh my gosh, like, look at the way the running game is working. And you have Jordan Howard and you have Boston Scott, and Jalen Hurts is getting involved in the run game, but you need to see more of that coming from your primary tailback. Honestly, I am so done with the Jalen Reagor experiment. I don't know how JJ Arcega-Whiteside is still a Philadelphia Eagle, other than probably the pride of general manager Howie Roseman.
100%.
Like, these guys are not hacking it. And that's not to say they can't hack it elsewhere, but it's like, this is bad. This is really bad. So after, you know, those first couple of receivers, I believe it was Pascal, also talking about the Colts a lot on this Bears podcast. But Pascal, I'm excited to see what he could do as a number 3 or 4 wide receiver.
Yeah, no, that was a great pickup too. I think that it's funny that Howie Roseman was able, like, multiple draft picks, getting A.J. Brown, and then you still have guys like JJ, you still have Jalen Reagor. Like, God, he missed on some picks, but somehow he's worked that situation favorably into the Eagles' favor. And again, I'm using that as a blueprint for what the Bears are going through. You know, where you make a coaching change in a young quarterback second season, which for everybody else is a detriment. Although I know that a lot of people were giving up on Jalen Hurts last year. How do you feel about Jalen Hurts? Like, I think he's a good quarterback. I'm happy to see him get this opportunity. I think he's going to be good. As an Eagles fan, how do you feel about him?
I like Jalen Hurts. So I think one thing that we've all kind of seen play out in the media is that last season and then into this offseason, there were plenty of rumors about where Deshaun Watson was going to go. Plenty of thoughts about Miami were out there, Carolina, even at points, obviously lands with the Cleveland Browns, but the Philadelphia Eagles were out there as well. My first reaction was absolutely not, obviously, because of all the off the field problems that Deshaun Watson brings, and we'll see what comes of his mounting legal problems. But on top of that, it was like, you're getting a very similar style of athlete. Can you make the argument that Watson is better in certain categories than Jalen Hurts? Yes, but Watson's had the time to prove that on the field for the Houston Texans. I think given the extended look, Jalen Hurts can prove himself. Is he going to be the top 5, one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL? I don't know. My gut says no, but I don't see a reason why he can't be top 10, top 15, and maybe is already in that top 15 conversation, depending on who you talk to. I think it's about him making better decisions, getting more accurate with the football, and then not putting himself in harm's way. And that goes with Nick Sirianni as well, in terms of running him and making him a primary running option. That you have to find that happy medium. The Bears dealt with that all last season with Fields, is that, he can run, he can be mobile, but you don't want to get him shellacked out in open space. So if he can stay healthy and he can start to make those little progressions, I think Jalen could be the guy.
No, 100%. I love all of that. And I think that Nick Sirianni did a wonderful job last season of just being like, we're going to go to our strengths right now. And we're going to go out there and we're going to win football games. We're still going to develop our quarterback. Then we're going to take a big swing in his third season, which is what you do with A.J. Brown, which is exactly what the Bears are planning to do as well. This is why everybody's talking about, this is why you don't trade for DK Metcalf this season or try to make a move. There'll be guys who are available next year. Terry McLaurin could end up being a guy who's available. Players like that. So I love the blueprint that the Eagles put out there. And one thing I will also say, I need to say this about Jalen Hurts, is when the situation happened in D.C. where the Eagles fans fell off the railing.
Yeah.
And
God.
Jalen Hurts stood there and helped people up and was concerned. He didn't Stafford them. He didn't point and then walk away and say, I don't want to be a part of this. And listen, I don't think that Stafford's required by law to do anything, but again, neither was Jalen Hurts, and he stood there and made sure these Eagle fans were okay. Then he took pictures with them. Yeah. Like, that's how you do. That's how you do.
Jalen strikes me as genuinely a good person. I remember following his career when he was at Alabama and Oklahoma. I loved his demeanor because those press conferences he would do with Alabama where he was under a ton of scrutiny. It was the balance between him and Tua, the back and forth, and then he goes to Oklahoma, and it's like, okay, now it's your chance to be the guy, no questions asked. I loved his demeanor after every game and that he was just calm, steady, doesn't get rattled. The dude was often in the weight room immediately after a win or a loss, getting after it. And he just seems like a decent person. I watched something on YouTube of like, it's a regular interview series. I'm blanking on what it's called, but it's basically like, oh, what do you do with your first million? They asked these young athletes. And I love the way you broke it down because it sounds like what like a young professional should be doing in any walk of life. And he was like, yeah, I'm renting a decent apartment in Philadelphia and I'm saving this and I'm putting this aside for that. Splurge a little bit on something fun. But other than that, I'm saving this for my future. And I was like, this is a smart guy. This is a decent human being. So to see him do that, I was like, yeah, this is a good guy who wants to win, wants to represent the organization. And he doesn't get rattled by a lot. What more could you ask for personality wise?
You love it. No, I love everything about him. There's nothing like all the interviews, the way he handled the situation in Alabama, everything. Real person. And again, not to rip on Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford, again, under no obligation to help, but like reacts like a rich guy would, like a rich kid from the Dallas suburbs. Like that's exactly how I would expect you to react. You're not obligated. You're not an EMT. You're not going to help. I get it. I understand. You're not like, I don't judge you. You're not required, but again, that's the way that I expect.
And I get he was probably drunk. Let's like acknowledge that. So he was probably like, I shouldn't be the one helping. However, maybe hang around for 30 seconds and show some concern as opposed to like,
even if you don't care, you can at least pretend. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. Again, that's my judgment on that. And I'm sorry. Again, not obligated by law. I do not. I just know who, and you just know people like that. Like, like I live in like where I live, like there's a street that separates like the super rich gated community. And then there's the rest of us who just afford condos because it's a good school district. So we're just trying to send our kids there. And I know how they would react and I know how I would react. But anyways, I think Jalen and I would react.
Aren't you?
I think Jalen and I would react in probably similar situations. I also think that Justin Fields would have reacted just like Jalen Hurts, even though that, he didn't take a photo with some guy from Barstool or whatever. That notwithstanding, what do you think about Justin Fields? I know a Penn State guy, you've gotten an opportunity to watch him. And of course you saw him last season during his rookie year, which I don't think is a fair assessment considering the Matt Nagy situation, but coming into the league, what did you think about Justin Fields and how do you think that he's going to be this year?
So I'll go back to his Ohio State days. I remember the knock on him, especially going into the draft, is that, he's not good on third down or he's not great in pressure situations. And I'm like, I got to disagree. I mean, like he can look at all sorts of numbers and such, but I'm like, I saw him in plenty of big games and he seemed to be just fine. I really love the arm talent idea. He's explosive as a passer. I think it's just a matter of maybe getting a little bit more accurate as time goes by. But that is something that, it's become pretty commonplace is that some of these younger quarterbacks, very rarely do they come in and they're just laser precision focused. Now, if you're Tyreek Hill, you apparently think the world of Tua Tagovailoa's accuracy. Yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, he's got some strides to make. My biggest concern for him, seeing him play for Chicago last season, was coming back to what I was saying before, is not to get the guy killed. There's too many instances I turn on a Bears game and I'm like, this guy's going to have David Carr syndrome because he's been hit so much and he really took some big time hits. I don't know exactly what the numbers were, but like Joe Burrow has been sacked like 130 times in 2 seasons, and I think Justin Fields might be kind of on pace behind him.
Yeah.
It's rough. That offensive line needs some bolstering, and like I've heard you talk about on this show before, Old Man Peters, who was Old Man Eagles Peters at one point. I'm like, I don't understand how this man's still playing organized sports.
Yeah.
He's held together by duct tape and good wishes. So they need some help for him, and then I think I know people want to knock the receiving core around him, but I'm like, I don't have a problem with a bunch of receivers that all feel like 2s and 3s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Darnell Mooney might be the guy that's like, he's your one, and that could be revealed this season. Maybe he has 1,000-yard season again. But like, I don't know. I feel pretty confident about the guys around him because if you're a decent quarterback, you'll find those guys, and Fields just needs to get comfortable.
Yeah, and if you have a good scheme, you have an offensive coordinator who's working for your skill set, which was the problem last year. You go look at that game against Cleveland. That was a terrible, terrible game. That was a fireable offense, and I applaud the McCaskies for showing a little bit of respect. Actually, I don't. Like, you should have just fired him. and then people are pulling out the files of like the Bears being on the 5-yard line. 1st and goal from the 5, and they're running verts. Like, what are you? Oh my, this guy, like, it's a kid who just doesn't understand how to play Madden. Again, this is troubling. This is the same thing that I think Minnesota's going to run into this year. Is like when you have these guys like Kevin O'Connell's coming over to be the offensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings. He's never called plays because he was a Sean McVay guy. Like, it's hard to call plays in the end. Like, the head coach is like being. It's difficult because you've got to control everything. You know what I'm saying? It's like if Tony Khan was not only the owner of AEW, but also had to do play-by-play. Like, there's a lot of things that go on to this.
You mean
like
what Vince used to do?
Well, Vince, at least, yeah.
Isn't that insane that was going on for years?
But at least he grew up in the business. He had worked for his dad for years. But I think for other people, I think, I guess you could argue that Eric Bischoff was doing that for a while too. And it's like, well, you got away with it for 88 weeks, 83 weeks. What is the number?
The 83 week. Well, there's the positive of like, not to sidebar entirely into wrestling here, but like
we're about to.
We're where the storylines are going. You know how you're booking things out in advance. So yeah, as a play-by-play guy, it's like, oh my God, I have the gift of foresight. That's fantastic. But to balance the two just on a day-to-day basis, I don't know how any of those people that we just named pulled any of that off. It's unbelievable.
It's so funny. Like, imagine being the play-by-play voice, but you already know that the Eagles have been booked to win in a double doink. The double doink. And then you have a Bobby the Brain Heenan sitting there next to you go, whose side is Cody Parkey on? You're like, what are you doing? Like, you're jumping ahead. You're spoiling it. I will say this. I think the thing was eventually, again, if you're strictly a football person and you don't like professional wrestling, this might be. Thank you for stopping by. If you could write the word "sick" in the comments, and we wish you well. Next week,
subscribe. Have a great day. Yeah.
Next week we'll have Alyssa Barbieri on, so you might want to tune back in for that one. But now we're going to talk wrestling because it's one of my passions, and I felt like we've given you a good chunk of football.
Thanks.
Sammy might not agree, and he might stop the recording at any time. But listen, the thing that I always drive, the Bobby the Brain Heenan thing always seems to be polarizing, and people like, he ruined the shock, but it's like he didn't know, and it feels like he figured it out. Did you ever know? Like, do you know? Like, did he not know? Did he know? Whatever. I know you weren't there for that, but were you even alive for that? Were you alive in '96?
I was 7 years old.
You were 4. I knew it.
7 years old. So like, I've told this on other platforms, but like, I didn't really become aware or interested in wrestling probably until the late 90s. So after
you started working for
so the late 90s, the early 2000s was really when I became aware of wrestling. So like, I missed the entire ECW wave, and I was living in Philadelphia, and like my parents were like, at that age, 7 years old, to be watching the height of the Attitude Era, like you could understand them being like, this isn't this isn't
you should be watching this,
right? Exactly. So I completely understood it, and obviously I became a fan as I got older, and then when I started working for WWE, it was like, oh, this is my life now. No, I never really dug into whether or not he knew in advance. I'm sure he's done plenty of interviews or something like that, but knowing certain things in advance, like it just depends. Like you want to know certain big things, But
Yeah.
there's little stuff that it's like, this just needs to be organic, the way that I call something from segment to segment.
Yeah.
But there's certain big things that I've known about in advance, and I've hid from my color commentators so that they reacted organically, and then I could just, keep the train on the tracks, so to speak. But it just depends. There's certain things where I actually have to sit there and like, do I want to know about this, or do I want to just kind of go for it?
Yeah. You want to be surprised, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.
Who's the AEW's ring announcer now? Is it Justin Roberts?
Yes.
Yeah, Justin Roberts. I remember being at WrestleMania 30 during the Brock Lesnar match. And I was sitting close to him, and I remember looking at him, and he has the microphone, and either he's the best actor in the world, because he was afraid to speak, and he was looking for somebody like, was that the real finish type of thing, where it's just like, he's like, did somebody mess up? Like, he doesn't want to announce it. And it was like, I don't know if that was an act, that was one of the best performances I've ever seen in my life. Like, it's crazy.
I believe that was probably real. So, because if you watch the broadcast, I forget when they actually made the ring announcement that Brock had won, but it was several minutes after.
It's delayed.
It was a really smart decision, whether that came from Vince or from the truck, to be like, we're going to wait on this. So his natural reaction is to look to his timekeeper for a cue of when to say it, because everything's happening on television. It has to happen when the truck is ready for it to happen. So he was probably genuinely stunned as a fan of, oh my God, was that real? Did something go wrong? And then, when do I talk? Because we all are pretty accustomed to hear ring announcers right after the decision, maybe 4 seconds after at most or something. So that tells me that was intentional, whether it was spur of the moment or it was planned of like, we're going to wait, because those crowd shots and that pall over the arena in New Orleans was way more important than any ring announce. And then especially how he delivered it. He didn't go real big. It was almost kind of like, to make a really gruesome comparison, you've been shot multiple times in an action movie or something like that, and it's the villain who's like breathing his last, and then you pop him one more time to make sure that the monster goes down. And that was the one last thing into the crowd's heart of like, and the winner of the match, Brock Lesnar.
Like, he's apologizing to us. Like, I'm so sorry.
Sorry, I got to do this. And everybody's like, yep, put us out of our misery.
I'm as shocked as you are. And it's fun to have those kind of moments that you aren't ready for, because it's just like, oh God. So like, of course the Undertaker beats him, and it's just such a fait accompli going into that, because it's WrestleMania, and of course it's the Undertaker. I remember I had asked his agent, who had sat next to me, and he was like, I go, what is this guy going to do? Like, what's his thing? Like, does he want to go to like 25-0? Like, where is the thing? And he just was like, he made a face, and I'm like, what is happening? And then I saw Michelle McCool was like dressed up and down walking. I'm like, what is going to happen? I'm like, wait a minute. Like, what is, like, I'm like Terry Benedict.
Be here for this show. Yeah.
I'm Terry Benedict figuring out that my casino got robbed. Like, wait a minute. Like, what is happening? And then Justin was perfect. And of all the things to remember for that, I will never forget Justin Roberts just being like, I don't want to get up. I don't want to get fired for what, I don't want to say the wrong thing or anything like that. And it was fun. It's always fun to do that as a fan. I also remember, I'm sorry, cutting you off, but
no,
there's always a security guard who makes sure people don't jump the rail. Mm-hmm. And of course, the main event is the triple threat, and Triple H comes down, and I'm like yelling at the security guard, like, stop it. Like, what are you doing? Like, this guy I think's going to jump into the ring. And Triple H looks at me and just is like, you're a grown man. Like, I'm like, I'm sorry.
Child, he'd have forgiven the child, but you.
Yeah. He's like, come on, you stupid Mark.
To go back to the Undertaker Brock thing, I think the thing that's so special on that is Cole's call. The streak is over. He waited until that 3 count is over, and that's all he says. And then they don't say anything for a good 3 minutes, something like that. Yeah. There's a beauty in silence. There is a beauty in simplicity. And I'm proud that I learned a lot from Cole, and I've tried to use that in a lot of my own commentary, but like, it's hard. You don't know sometimes. And especially in a moment like that, where I don't know if that commentary team individually or as a whole knew about that moment in advance, but still, like, that's all you're thinking about is like, how do I not mess up right now? Because this moment, it's special.
100% for that Silver Dome to go. I'm kidding. If you're a wrestler, you'll get it. You'll get it. Don't.
God,
Saints
that was
fans.
great.
Saints fans already upset at me for picking them to win 8 games. The gold rank doesn't even know. I'm like, it's a joke. It's a joke. Some very famous wrestler referred to it as the Silver Dome, which was amusing. I will say this though, for a lot of the production, like for me, maybe Cole knew because he needs to have that. He needs to be spot on with the streak is over type thing. He's got to know. Feels like, you get production notes and everything. You started as an in-ring announcer. I have the most anxiety because I do stand-up. I do other things. I don't need to always remember stuff. I would be so frightened to be the in-ring announcer, to be like, I can't remember this. Like, I'm going to mess up Triple H's name, like type of thing. Like, am I going to be able to remember this? I don't have a card. There's no prompter. Mm-hmm. Was that frightening for you? Because it's like, there's a lot of information you got to get out. What was that like?
It's terrifying, and I'm fortunate that I didn't do it on live TV at any point. I always was doing it at live events, which for people who don't know anything about wrestling, those are non-televised wrestling events for WWE. Yeah. So they travel all over the country and all over the globe doing these events. So I cut my teeth with that. I'd say in like 2015, 16, just getting started with it, of going to like armories in the state of Florida where like you've got 50 to 500 people max at some of these events, and you're really learning how to work a crowd. You're learning how to work these intimate environments and make it personal. So it's a really good skill, I think, for anybody in hosting. And then you talk about stand-up, like it's crowd work. It's just reading their emotions. And it's like, oh, they're going this way. I should maybe make an adjustment here or something. So plenty of those situations have happened. But I remember ring announcing for Andrade, who in WWE was also Andrade and Andrade Cien Almas at one point, whatever.
Yeah.
When he first signed with WWE, didn't have a ring name, so he was under his conventional, his real name of Manny Andrade. And I was announcing him at some show in Florida against Biff Busick, formerly Oni Lorcan. Also, his real name is Chris Gerard as well. So I love Biff. And I went to do his ring announcement. I think it was maybe a byproduct of hearing Lillian Garcia for years in WWE. Yeah. Lillian would put a little extra flair on the names that were Hispanic because her name's Lillian Garcia, and she would do that. So naturally, it was just kind of this weird thing that it was like, oh, well, she did it, so I'll do it, and not really thinking it through. So I remember announcing his hometown of Gomez Palacio, Durango, Mexico. Don't ask me why. I still remember that now.
Of course,
and
it's ingrained now.
Tried to make it sound, authentic and pronounce it accordingly. And the timekeeper was like, "Hey, you're from Philly, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "So sound like a guy from Philly." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, that's fair." So there's a lot of things that,
that's everybody.
That's everybody, because you don't want to be disrespectful. And if that's, I'm such a stickler for pronunciations. Like, I don't know if you remember when, I don't know how they're pronouncing his name now, but Mustafa Ali. He's been commonly referred to as Mustafa Ali. He had a heel run in the pandemic era. We're still in the pandemic era. What am I saying? But like the PC and Thunderdome era, where he was saying, this is how you actually pronounce this name. It's Mustafa. So if I, as the lead play-by-play guy, don't acknowledge the heel saying, call me by this name, then no one's going to respect him. If baby faces, etc., aren't doing it, if they're not doing it, that's fine, because they're actually stepping in there and fighting. I have to be the coward who's like, yep, he said that's how he says his name. I'm saying his name that way. Man, the blowback I got on social media, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is how he wants his name pronounced. If you told me my name was Adam, I'd be like, great, you're Adam Rank. And that's, you know, what you said. I'm like, whatever you want, dude. It's silly.
It's not, but like you see like news people do that all the time, where whenever there's a Latin American name, you know, they will try to roll their R's and do the accent. But like you were there when Rusev was there. You didn't all of a sudden take an Eastern block.
No.
Like with Shinsuke Nakamura, you weren't sitting there. You didn't take an accent to that one. You'd said it like an East Philly guy or whatever.
Yeah. And again, it all comes from a place of just trying to be respectful based on how the talent pronounced their name. So just trying to be careful with all that stuff and just being sensitive. And I just took it personally, especially with Ali, because a lot of it was just people online being like, well, this is how I think it should be pronounced. And I'm like, I don't care. I genuinely don't care. This is how he wants it pronounced. So
100%. Listen, I can't have ill will back on this show because I still haven't figured out how to say 3 Kangs. Like, I don't know. And I can't do it. Like, look at me.
It's okay that you don't. Don't do it.
I'm a white guy wearing a peach-colored Henley. Like, I need to stay in my lane. You're the 3 Kings. Okay, that's it. Like, I understand. I understand my role in life. That's what I'm doing. And I get it. It's just one of those things. It's good to know it's a thing that I always talk about. Play the tee boxes suitable to your skills, which is it's a golf metaphor, but it's also a life lesson.
For me, it's stay in the cart and drink White Claws. That's the best place for me to be on a golf course.
Oh my gosh, White Claws, Tom! I didn't need to know that about you.
Just gotta say slim, man. You know,
who am I
kidding?
the double doink I was able to look past, but the White Claws I might not. Like, you can't even listen. Topo Chico makes a nice seltzer.
True.
Stone Brewing makes a nice seltzer.
I've been there in California a couple times. The one in San Diego, yeah, I like them.
They have a nice seltzer. We don't get anything for them, but Stone Brewing, if you're listening. Send more. I think I got off their list.
The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Stone Brewing.
Stone Brewing. Listen, we needed that alcohol sponsor. So if somebody,
hey man,
I know Stone sends me free stuff.
I've got one for my podcast. They're based in northeastern Pennsylvania, Funk Brewing. They've got some stuff in the works that I'm pretty excited about.
I love it. Okay, see, listen, get your plugs out there. Let's also talk about real quick, or not real quick. We can take our time. But Slammiversary is this Sunday. Listen, I know that there's a lot of Saturday pay-per-views. I know that AEW. I don't know if I can mention. I feel like the Forbidden Door's been opening up. I can mention AEW. They do Saturday, but they do Saturday pay-per-views except for 3-day weekends, which is fine. You've done Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. I feel like most of your pay-per-views are Saturday. Am I mistaken?
For Impact, they have been for Saturdays, and then WWE pretty consistently is on Sundays. Yeah,
they're premium live events, like whatever.
Wait, is that what they're called now?
Did you not know this? Like
No, I don't work there.
You're that detached. I love it. No, good for you.
Premium live. That's fun.
Listen. The only reason I walked back to the WWE, and I've just kind of gone back in a way because Cody and Brandy are so nice, and they're such delightful people, and so I'm like, listen, Cody needs to make money. He's got a daughter now. Like, go get your money. Like, I'm not mad at you. Like, he's still my friend. Like, I'm happy for him. I'm going to support him. So I did watch his match against Seth Rollins, who there's a lot of WWE guys I still like, but I don't. But for me, it's I love Impact. I like AEW. I like the way that the products have been going. And of course, selfishly, my friend Eric Jeremy, to some people. Oh, can I say his kayfabe? Can I say his real name? I actually had to. I switched it back. Like, I don't know. Like, I remember one time I was having dinner with him and his wife, and I'm like, I don't know what to call. Like, I don't know. Like, what do I call him? Like, it's always such a weird thing. Like, hey,
it just depends on the relationship you develop. Like, I was just mentioning Biff before. Like, I know him by 3 names, but I pretty much just always call him Biff. Steve Macklin is somebody I work with in Impact Wrestling now. He was Steve Cutler once upon a time. His legal name is Steve Kubrick. I still call him Cuddy off of Cutler to this day. So it's really weird that when I'm calling his matches, I'm like, Macklin. So it depends on relationships, person to person.
It's that's true. Because I know that we do fantasy leagues together, and it's always Jeremy is the thing. And all the guys who are in it call him Jeremy. So I'm like, oh, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But then when he used to text me under his real name, or when I had his real name in my phone, I would get confused with another Jeremy. And then the other Jeremy I don't like as much. So I'd be real friendly and be like, oh God, that's not even Eric, like forget. So I had to switch it back. I switched it back to Eric again because there's no mistaking who it's coming from. Yeah. But he's got a championship match this weekend. He's going up against Josh Alexander. You have the Briscoes, against the Good Brothers. So it seems like a fun event. How has it been? Like, how has it been working for Impact? Because I feel like, I don't know, knowing you, like we're not best friends or anything like that, but it feels like you're having fun. It just feels like I feel happy for you. Every time I see you, I just feel happy for you. Has it been good?
It's been great. Because I think when I was released from WWE, there's absolutely that question of, do I even want to be in wrestling anymore? And I needed some time away for a number of reasons. But I told Scott D'Amore after I did Hard to Kill, I was like, you gave me back my passion. This is something that I love doing. And to be able to do it on the schedule that they provide is fantastic. It allows me to do a multitude of other things, and my podcasts, my opportunities with ESPN radio. Like I can do a lot more things, and it's just freed me up. But just calling the shows with, whether it be D'Lo Brown, who is amazing to work with at Hard to Kill, and now Matthew Raywalt, and I've worked with a bevy of the talent as guest commentators. It's just different. And there's a lot of different ways that you could say, oh, it's different from WWE, but I've gotten a lot of freedom. Having Josh Matthews as my executive producer has made everything an absolute breeze, because he and I are looking at everything the exact same way. We both came up in the WWE system, so we identify the things that like got drilled into our head, but also like we need to do this differently. Let's twist this a little bit so that it feels authentic to Impact. And I don't know, man. I just feel different. I feel like myself. I feel like Tom Phillips was a bit of a nerd, and Tom Hannafan is just kind of out there enjoying wrestling, and I'm trying to do my best. And I think the thing I was really proud of was Rebellion pay-per-view, which we did at the end of April. Josh Alexander wins the title from Moose, and I was so proud of that call. I was so proud of the entire production that went into that night, and it's just really special. And I feel really attached to the company, even just in about 6 months' time. So to be a part of this show, to celebrate 20 years of this company at Slammiversary, it means the world to me, because like I think back to when Mike Tenay and Don West were the voices of Impact Wrestling.
Yeah.
And it's no disrespect to, Josh Matthews, Matt Stryker, Jeremy Borash, the list goes on and on, but that was the team. I believe they should go into the Impact Hall of Fame as a duo. They're the benchmark for me. And so be able to sit in that chair 20 years later after that first broadcast that featured both of those guys, I can't tell you how special that is.
It's going to be an amazing event. And there's been some great wrestling over the years. Going back when they first started, it was a breath of fresh air. Am I saying that right? Yeah. It's funny. And it's funny that you mentioned Josh Matthews too, because I had a brief interaction with him when he was released with the WWE, and we talked, and he was, looking, he's a sports guy as well. And we were talking about opportunities, and, just talking with him, I think we had the same conversation about like, but the cool thing is like, I would never walk away from wrestling. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think this is the perfect opportunity for both of you. And obviously you've taken the ball and you've run with it. It's really cool to see that too. Again, like, it's good. You can hear the passion in your voice again. And it's
thank you, man.
It's just something that WWE will drill out of you. And, but at the same point, like, oh yeah, we're also wrestling fans, so it's good, which is why I enjoy those broadcasts as well. And I think that this weekend is going to be a lot of fun. The Briscoes, they're a lot of fun. They're a lot of fun too. And I think a lot of people are starting, and it's one of the cool things about having the Forbidden Door and doing a lot of that stuff is like the eyes on this has been growing. And I think that all of you outside of the WWE have done a great job of growing or just exposing people to like, oh, this is fun. There's some fun things that you can watch, and you can see a match that's longer than 2 minutes and still tell a story.
I think wrestling fans get too hung up on I'm for this company and I'm for no other company. Man, like
I hate that. Yeah.
There's a reason that when MJF was introducing W. Morrissey or teasing him rather, he was saying, and you can't teach that. And the entire audience knew what MJF was talking about. Wrestling fans watch wrestling. Period. Yeah. They watch their favorite wrestlers. And I understand that over the years, the concept of individual wrestlers being the draw has kind of subsided, and it's been more about what's the company name on the billboard. Is it WWE, AEW, Impact, New Japan, Ring of Honor, etc.? But at the end of the day, I watch wrestling for the wrestlers that I like, the guys that I'm friends with at the end of the day, not because of the company that's attached to it. So I think people get way too bogged down on that divisiveness of, oh, it's got to be especially WWE versus AEW. It's like, man, like, that you acknowledge most of these storylines based on the fact that you probably watch some WWE, you probably watch some Impact, New Japan, etc. The list goes on and on. I just wish we'd all stop pretending. Not all, but most of us. Let's be honest.
100%. Stay off the internet, I think, is the thing. Stay off Twitter. Like, it's just too like toxic. Like, you like who you like. Like, again, when there's premium live events, I will watch my friends or the people who I enjoy, and similar like. And the same thing. Well, yeah, that's the thing. I will tell you though, the things that are recorded every week, It's always Impact, and it's always the AEW shows. I don't even record. Oh wait, I shouldn't say this in case ever I need a job from Fox or something. Like, no, I love SmackDown though. By the way, love SmackDown. By the way, no, but it's true. But it's like, again, you just love wrestling, and I'm thrilled for you. I'm glad that you're able to go out there and continue to do wrestling because the wrestling world needs you. And it's cool that you're doing some sports stuff too. You got the ESPN radio, as you mentioned, the podcast, and what can you plug real quick? So if anybody enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you did, again, use the word, if you stuck through the wrestling talk, write Sick Wrestling. Let us know, because I know other wrestlers who would love to come onto this podcast and talk. So if you are enjoying this, we'll be happy to bring them on. But Tom, what are some other things? Where can we follow you? What can we do in addition to watching Slammiversary on Sunday?
Slammiversary is Sunday, June 19th, live on pay-per-view and Fight TV. Go to impactwrestling.com to see about tickets potentially if you're in the Nashville, Tennessee area for that show, or if you just want to learn more about how you can watch it. You can check out my podcast, Pay Dirt, a Penn State football show with myself and former Penn State quarterback Matt McGloin. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And we recently got syndicated by ESPN Radio State College. So just broadening my relationship with ESPN Radio and all its affiliates. It's been a lot of fun. And what else was I going to say? Oh, we have a t-shirt now at shop.believe, BLEAV.com for the podcast itself. It's got McGloin's name on the back. There will not be a Tom Hannafan shirt. What would you put on it? What would you put on it? Like a name and a random number? Like,
I don't know. Yeah.
You tell me.
Microphone? I don't know. A microphone? Tom with the microphone.
Nice, silly face on
there it is.
T-shirt. We'll do
like the cool version. The cool version that we see on the Twitter avatar.
Oh, the smirk, as my dad likes to refer to it as. Yeah.
Yeah. The Johnny Cash all black. It's a great look. And this was great. Again, I know that you asked me, I forgot to ask you before the show started how much time, because you were like, how much time do you need me? I'm like, 10 minutes. And now it's been
we didn't even talk about Jaquan Brisker. As a Penn State fan, I'm thrilled you guys got Jaquan
Hey,
Brisker.
by the way, why did I miss this part? Hey, guess what? Guess what? All the football fans who checked out, we're bringing it back.
Here it is.
You know what? I'm sorry, Sammy. By the way, extend the show. This is the overrun. This is like Tony Khan has called TNT and said that we can. I know it's impact. I know you don't.
We need to go to 10:05 or 11:05, whatever.
We're going late.
Yeah,
I gotta tell you, I was thinking Allen Robinson because I was going through.
Monday, Rob, but Jaquan Brisker, dude, you guys got a steal in the second round. I can't believe he slipped out of the first. Him with Eddie Jackson could be one of the best safety tandems, maybe not this season, but in a very short amount of time in the NFL. Brisker can do literally everything. He can play in the box and get physical. He can do man and zone coverages. He can do complicated coverages. I always refer to him as a zombie, but I think you probably, as a wrestling fan and as a Bears fan, will start identifying him as the Undertaker.
Yes.
Because he would at points get injured and then just pop back up and get injured and pop back up. Now, I'm not trying to say, he's super injury prone, but like the dude literally was playing with a bruise, like an injured shoulder with like the apparatus on his shoulder. And he just kept hitting guys and he just kept going. He would go out for a couple of snaps, come back in. You couldn't keep this guy down. So I think Jaquan Brisker is a really great addition. I forget who it was, that former Bears staffer who said some terrible things about him. I'm glad he's gone. Brisker has endured that, and it looks like he's going to do some really good things this year.
No, I love him. And it's one of those guys who, admittingly, I wasn't as familiar with when they drafted him because I tend to skew towards offensive guys because of my fantasy background. I tend to look at that in a lot of the first rounders, but I knew who he was because as I was doing my mock draft with the twist, he was a guy who at the end of the first round, you're like, God, this is a person that one of these good teams could bring in. And then obviously once the Bears selected him, I went back and watched him and I'm like, this guy's amazing. He reminds me and a lot of Bears fans of Mike Brown. I think he's a little bit more physical, but he's also a guy who's always in the right place. And it's never an accident. Whenever there's a player like Jaquan Brisker, when he's in the right place at the right time, it's not an accident. It's because he knows how to play football. And I think you probably saw a lot of that at Penn State.
Oh, and to the point now at Penn State, granted, they've changed defensive coordinators. So former Miami, Florida head coach Manny Diaz is now the DC. And he believes in a 3 safety system, but they need 3 safeties to make up for Jaquan Brisker's absence. Jair Brown is still there, and he's going to have a nice NFL career at some point. But Jaquan was able to do so much at safety that now that's like, well, we have a former safety that we're moving to linebacker and Jonathan Sutherland, and we've got Keaton Ellis and Zakee Wheatley that are going to kind of fill into that coverage void. Like, how often do you see that in college football where a guy leaves and the entire system changes around his position?
Yeah, it doesn't happen. So it's good to see. I think a lot of Bears fans are excited. We love that he's wearing, I do. I love that he's wearing number 9. I love that Kyler Gordon is wearing 6 and Brisker's wearing number 9. I'm like, yeah, I go, those are legendary Bears numbers.
We got to get Jim McMahon and Brisker. Yeah, you've had Jim on the show.
We did, yeah. He was great.
Best day of your life.
I still cry thinking about it. It was a big thing for me. I'm an emotional person, but like just the childhood memories. Yeah.
Days your kids were born, interviewing Jim McMahon somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle there. Yeah.
Fluctuates, yeah.
For sure. Absolutely. But it was wonderful to have him on the show. And the goal thing too is, and if all the people who checked out, this is what we're going to clip off. We're going to clip off this Jaquan Brisker talk. That'll be what we post on social media. Be like, look at us getting down to the nitty gritty. That's what they want to hear. Then they'll tune in and be like, you guys are talking about Slammiversary? I'll be, listen, I like it all. I like football. This was perfect for me. Talking a little football, talking a little wrestling. I love the life that you're leading, and really appreciate you coming on and spending so much time with us here today. Can't wait to see the show this Sunday. It's going to be a lot of fun. I implore everybody. But Tom, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, bud. Appreciate it. Go Bears.
Bear down. Love it. All right, there he goes, the great Tom Hannafan. Again, ask you to please, if you enjoy wrestling, if you have a little discretionary income, you're like, I want to watch a wrestling show. Slammiversary, I think, and again, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of surprises, so you might want to tune in and check that out. So, and do it for our friend Tom. So we'll have him back hopefully sometime in the near future. But I want to thank everybody for hanging with us for a longer extended show. I was wondering, I was like, hey, do we need to go 54 minutes? We did it. We did that and some. So I appreciate everybody doing that. Appreciate you being here. We will be back next week. We're going to have Alyssa Barbieri on the podcast next week. We'll have a Take It to the Rank on Tuesday, of course. But a lot of cool stuff is happening. Thanks so much for being here. So until next week, bear down.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.